Hi, and welcome to our webinar tonight. We're joined this evening from the Pesticide Action Network with Nick Mole. We're going to have a little discussion about pesticides and chemicals in general, things using on your garden, but also things that you're basically eating with your food and getting with your water. So, hi, Nick.
Hello there. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming and joining us.
Yes, thank you. And I think first, maybe you could explain maybe the basics and maybe what a pesticide is, maybe what they are and why we should think about them.
Yeah, happy to do so. So yeah, I'm Nick from the Pesticide Action Network. We're the only UK charity that works on all aspects of pesticides. And we're concerned about pesticides because they are poisons. They're poisons that are purposely put into the environment to kill things, to kill living organisms. And of course, the big problem is they don't just kill the things that are deemed to be pests. They also affect other organisms, so including people. Do you want to put those couple of slides up, and I can sort of show a few of the issues with pesticides? So this next one would be great. So that's perfect. So as I say, pesticides are poisons. They help grow food by keeping pests and diseases down, but as I said, they have all these side effects. So in terms of wildlife biodiversity, we've lost 50% of our farmland bird species since the 1970s. 75% decrease in insect abundance. This is all over the world. The fairly well advertised and documented impacts of pesticides on honeybees, and perhaps more importantly, wild bees. Actually, there's a report out today talking about how hedgehog numbers have plummeted, particularly in the countryside, but they're a little bit safer in towns where there are fewer pesticides. We've lost 95% of our wildflower meadows since the end of the Second World War, which is not all down to pesticides. It's to do with land use changes and farming and this sort of thing. But our diversity of plant species has been hindered by the amount of herbicides we've used. And they're just a few of these: bats, toads, frogs, voles. I mean,
how would it affect the animals? Is it because their food is gone? Is it
in a number of ways? So they can be directly poisoned. They can lose their food sources. They can use their variety of foods, and also the way that pesticides have driven farming. So we get more intensive monocultures. So we're losing all these habitats for species to survive and thrive on.
So monoculture means just one thing growing. Like you'd be growing corn or you'd be growing wheat.
Exactly, yeah, and pesticides help do that. They keep down on things that would naturally occur and mean that you'd have to rotate and change things. So yes, we can have this more intensive agriculture, which is bad. It's bad for us. It's bad for the landscape, and it's bad for everything. So for the next slide. Excellent. So pesticides are used to grow our food. Now, this is a study we did on the Department of Health's School Fruit and Vegetable Scheme. Now, this scheme is aimed at children. It's to give them a healthy start by giving them different types of fruit and vegetables to eat.
They get them free, don't they? In snacks and breaks.
They do get them free. And so we had a look at actually what was on the fruit and vegetables that we are giving our children. And it's actually worse than is in generally available. So this list on the sort of the right hand side. This is what we found from the study. This is what we're giving our children as part of their healthy start. Now, we would always advise that children eat fruit and vegetables, but we also did some calculations, and for an extra, I think it was £1 a child a day, we can actually give them all organic fruit and veg, which would have none of this on. So we reported this. The Department of Health, whose scheme this is, said pesticides have nothing to do with us. That's DEFRA. And then also as a result, which is not really a victory, they stopped publishing this information. So they're just ignoring the facts. So this is what we give our children. And there are similar figures for all the fruit and veg that's non-organic that we eat on a daily basis in the UK. And this is imported fruit and vegetables, stuff that's grown here, the whole range.
And if you looked at that in a bit more detail, an endocrine disruptor is something that disrupts your hormones.
Yes,
so that's something that can affect their hormone balance and their growth even.
Well, and then particularly harmful for children, developing bodies as endocrine disruptors. They're a huge and really worrying development. A lot of pesticides are, and this is not, by the way, this is not us saying that these are carcinogens or endocrine disruptors.
There's lots
This
of
is
research.
this is actually the people that make them,
Oh, gosh.
and our regulatory system that say, well, yes, these are. So we'll keep them down a bit. But this is the kind of thing that we're getting. And then and then sort of the third area, if we can have the next slide. So pesticides are also used in our towns and cities. So our parks, playgrounds, streets, pavements, schools, hospitals, etc. This is a list from one of the most recent surveys of the things that are being sprayed around where we live, we work, we play, particularly where our children live and work, where so parks, let's say playgrounds, schools, hospitals, etc. And this is what we're being exposed to on a daily basis in many places.
Yeah.
So we've got, I think is it 13 probable, possible, or known human carcinogens being sprayed about. We've got acutely toxic.
Some quite strong research for glyphosate. Glyphosate has some quite strong research for it to say that it's a carcinogen now.
Well, there are lots, and actually there are other things linked to it as well. But that's
The endocrine disruption again, the hormones, isn't it, that we look at with that one too.
And liver and kidney disease and problems and birth defects, etc. So there's an awful lot of linked to glyphosate. But this is the really bizarre thing. So these are used in our towns and cities. There's no need for us to use pesticides at all in our towns and cities. France banned them 2 years ago. All of the cities of Belgium, Luxembourg, many in the Netherlands, Denmark, Italy don't use any pesticides. None of this is sprayed on their streets. You don't need to use it. And yes,
so why are we using it?
Yeah. Well, why are we using it though?
We're using it because it's cheap. Yep. We've always done it. It works, which is a major factor, and the government says it's all right. And there's an awful lot of people that think towns need to look neat and tidy, and a stray dandelion is going to cause huge harm to everyone. So there's a lot of reasons, ingrained things. We've always done it like this is one, but mainly because the government says, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah,
it can't come as a huge shock that pesticides are a problem though, because I was reading earlier on the website that we've been using them for hundreds and hundreds of years in different realms, and we often found they're toxic. So we started, of course, with arsenic and mercury, moved on to DDT. They're often found toxic, and then we ban them. So it can't be a huge shock now that they're still extremely toxic, yet we keep using them.
Well, there are two things with this. So yes, you're right. We have used things. We've used things since to control pests and diseases since whenever. But DDT. So we had DDT came along, and this is the problem. It's the pesticide cycle. So DDT comes along, everyone thinks, great, silver bullet, we're going to grow loads of stuff and it'll be amazing. Somebody then points out that actually it's having all these things, these negative, harmful effects that hadn't been predicted. So they invent something else to replace it. That's great. It doesn't do this what that was doing, but now it does something different. And we just keep on doing that, and that's where we are. And then the second school of thought is that, well, we can regulate and make sure that it's okay. We can at acceptable levels of risk, whatever they may be. Let's not forget that there are two things that pesticides do really well. One of them is kill things, and the other thing is make vast profits for the companies that make them. And of course, the politicians who are lobbied by those companies will go and work for those companies, etc., etc. So there are huge.
And there's a lot of reasons that we don't understand how they work, aren't there? And I think the concentration, like DDT, because it concentrates through a food chain, doesn't it? As you go up the food chain, you see that, obviously, because they're eating more and more food at the lower level with the DDT, and as it goes up and you get to the higher species, they've got more DDT in their system.
Yeah,
we don't know that, do we? We don't understand how it works.
Well, one thing I can tell you for certain is that everybody who is watching this, or who is going to watch this, if they're not watching live, has got DDT in them. DDT was banned 40 years ago. So you two are probably too young to have been around while it was approved. I wasn't. So it's in us all. It's persistent in the environment, and it travels. There's polar bears with DDT. There's no farming in the Arctic. It does. And we do know the problems. We do know what the problems are, but we've got strong lobbies in support of pesticides. The National Farmers Union are pro pesticides, and they don't. Well, my personal view is they're not actually a union because they don't look after their members. They don't care about whether they're poisoned with pesticides or not. There's a lot of people backing it, and one of perhaps the most alarming things, and this is particularly true of the endocrine disrupting chemicals, is what they've always been modelled on. The higher the dose, the higher the risk. Well, with endocrine disrupting chemicals, actually, there's a lot of new research coming over. It's not even that new anymore, actually, that actually lower doses have a higher impact. So the lower the dose, the higher the impact.
Because hormones are very low level in our bodies. Hormones are at tiny levels in our bodies.
Yeah. And actually less can have a bigger impact. And then the other thing that we have almost no understanding of is the combinatory effect, or what we call the cocktail effect. So we're not, pesticides are tested one by one.
Mm-hmm.
They're not tested when they're in conjunction with another pesticide, or when are the other many chemicals that we're exposed to on a daily basis. There is no understanding of how that works, either environmentally or within our body. So that's completely understood. Not understood.
Understood, yeah. And how, when you talk obviously through our food, and you've talked about through parks and other ways, what other ways can we be exposed to pesticides? Is it mainly through what we eat? Is it mainly through what we're in contact with?
Yeah, I mean, unless you're a farmer or a contractor, then it will be in the food you eat, so dietary intake. But then also potentially, you can be exposed if you live in an agricultural area, rural area, or potentially if you're in a town or a city, you could be exposed to pesticides. But they would be the main routes for people that don't work with them. And it is worth pointing out that whilst farmers are often maligned for pesticide use, they're actually the ones that suffer the biggest damage from pesticides. There's no question about it, and they are completely ignored, at least in this country, but not in other countries. So yes, dietary intake is one of the biggest ones, and you eat, unless you eat a completely organic diet, and even then you're not guaranteed to avoid pesticide residues, you will be ingesting pesticides on a daily basis.
Yeah. What about, we were talking about the endocrine disruptors a second ago, and I always think, it's now becoming, breast cancer is becoming, one of our biggest killers of women over 50. And if you think about, your lovely rose garden out the back, or your lovely lawn out the back, that they love to throw lots of things on, like Roundup and things, to make it pretty, you can't help but see that there could be some relationship to the kind of demographic of doing lots of gardening that possibly could be a little bit too chemical based, and the fact we're seeing nice rises in hormonal cancers.
It's quite possible, and I mean, one of the things that we're calling for, and one of the things they've done in France, we want the government to ban the sale of pesticides to the public. The public they're not trained, whereas if you're a farmer or a contractor or whoever does it as a professional basis, you have to have training and a certificate. You're not trained. People, and
they wear protective. They wear protective gear, a lot of them, when they're doing it, don't they? Whereas actually, people in the garden don't.
No, and also, so there might be safety instructions on the back of the label, but how many people realistically read the label, which is in very small print on the back of the thing? So we have had some movements in that. We've had the Waitrose and the Co-op have both taken pesticides off their shelves. So that's a start. And we're trying to get the rest of the supermarkets to follow suit, and then we hope sort of the garden centres and DIY stores. But the government can ban them. It's not going to. What harm's it going to do? Nothing. People get a bit more exercise because they might have to do a bit more weeding. Okay, your roses might look so delightful, but then you're not exposing yourself to carcinogenic chemicals.
Not just that though; it's the gardeners as well. A lot of the gardeners use them almost routinely. I had to have a bit of an argument with mine over the weeding. I was like, no chemicals in my garden, but they use them almost automatically.
Well, they do, because they work. They're easy and they're cheap, and that's the bottom line. And they're, like I said before, they're approved. They are. So I mean, it's a very similar situation to cigarettes and asbestos and any of these other things that were once thought to be absolutely safe, and then it's turned out that actually maybe they're not. Maybe sugar or whatever. Maybe we should regulate and do something about them, but we haven't quite got to that stage yet.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And who's at highest risk from the pesticides? Are there people who you think are at higher risk? Are there?
Yeah, there are more vulnerable groups, and they are obviously children, infants, children who are developing because the hormone system, etc., etc. Pregnant women, the elderly, and obviously people who've got immune suppression and that sort of thing issues, or already suffering from something. So there are more vulnerable members of society, but then there are also subsections within that. So, like I said, farmers, sheep farmers, etc. People who come into regular contact more often with sort of the higher strength pesticides, if you like, they're also more vulnerable. But there are more vulnerable groups, definitely, and children are are, well
high on
within
the
that group.
You can't help but think they're already starting to notice that, though, because you see now your baby food, your kids' snacks, a lot of them are coming through organic, and you can't help but think that they know this on some level, because you see almost a lot more organic in that range.
It's the mums who are driving that, though, probably, isn't it? It's probably the mums who are driving it.
It is, but which I think brings us back to that school fruit and veg scheme point. I actually think the government are buying up the cheapest old bits of fruit and veg that the supermarkets aren't taking and stuffing it into our children, and the pesticide residues on that would tend to bear that out. So, it's I think there are more parents.
But they could campaign at school as well. Parents have power at school. We have power to go and suggest that the fruit becomes organic. We can go into some of our schools and campaign a bit on that.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I'd recommend that you do. We've tried working with schools in the past, and bar a few examples, it's been very difficult. But the school groundsmen shouldn't be spraying pesticides along the hard surfaces of the pavements or the playgrounds in schools. And perhaps
make you wonder when they do it in ours. I think when we look at all these schools around, and it does make you wonder, doesn't it, what they do?
It does
around
look very
kids.
pretty around the edges.
Most of them do. Most of them do. So it would be worth asking that question. Say, actually, we don't want this anymore. Thank you.
Yeah. But again, it's the parents. You start mentioning it on your group chats, because most parents now have a group WhatsApp. You start mentioning it on there, and it's the power of parents. It's the power of persuasion, isn't it? The more people who start knowing about it, the more people start asking the question, the more the school's going to turn around and go, maybe we should.
That's one of the things that we've tried very much to do with our pesticide-free towns campaign. So I started it 5 years ago. And because it was just me at the time, and I couldn't possibly get around to every town and city and village in the UK, what we did was we created all these materials for the public to use, so that anybody could set up their own campaign in their local area, whether it was a town or a city or even just a small area, whatever they wanted to do. And that's grown. We've got well over 100 campaigns running across the UK now. They're doing it themselves. It's all free for people to use if they want to come to our website and get that. Or talk to me about it. But we've now, more importantly, we've got upwards of 80 towns, cities, villages who are moving away or phasing out the use of pesticides in all the areas under their control. And where it was once the public coming to us and say, how can we do this? We're now actually getting councils coming straight to us and saying, actually, how can we phase out pesticides? So just that public
That's
awareness.
That's something you could talk to your MP about as well, isn't it? It's something that you could write a letter to your MP about.
You could, but they can't do anything about it.
Would it be council then that you talk to?
It's the council you need to speak to. So your council, and actually there's a lot of power, because local councils aren't elected by very many people. So just a few people who might want to do something different and will vote for you if you do that is a very powerful message.
Okay, great.
I'm assuming also we could do it the way around, because we keep seeing that wildflower meadows should be the number one thing. I always think we should start pushing towards a little bit as well. And I always look at the fact that where we live, it's a lovely little town. We have so many verges. And every year I don't understand why we mow them and why we don't plant them as wildflower meadows. And every year I think, why don't we do this? Yeah. And
certain places they have started to do them. Certain areas you now see they are leaving them, and they have projects doing them, but not enough.
I actually asked once, because I actually had a patient who actually did the mowing, and I said, how would you stop it? And he said, if you put up a little placard saying wildflower meadow, we'll skip that verge.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's that simple? He was like, yeah.
It is as simple as that. It can be as simple, and actually not mowing verges is great. It saves the council money, because it costs money to mow. It's and it works. It's a really good way of doing it. My personal thing, the thing that I really dislike is annual bedding plants. When you get at a roundabout or like the market square or somewhere, it's planted up with these begonias and things.
Might be like most of where we live.
Yeah,
only live for a year. And they're useless for pollinators. They cost councils are spending thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of pounds on these annual bedding plants. Rip them out.
They do.
Get perennial native species and get them growing. And then you can save a load of money.
You put bulbs in as well that grow in spring.
And you don't need weeding or anything. There's a lot of simple things that can be done, but it's trying to change people's mindsets, particularly the sort of neat and tidy Britain in Bloom brigade.
Yeah,
you can do it by just being, by working out what you put in it. Because you planted all our ones at the clinic, and we just got all the bulbs ready so that
they put in perennials.
Yeah, they did have a nice kind of swap over. So as one's dying off, the other one you can see it's growing through. You can just see it perfectly changes.
Yeah,
they look a bit haphazard because I planted the bulbs and I just threw them in, but
they work quite well.
They work brilliantly, and you can see, they attract bees, they attract everything.
Exactly. It's simple things like that. But then it does need the public to actually say yes. I mean, this is a problem that we've come up with councils in the past. It's we'll stop doing this. We'll let somewhere go a little bit wilder. And then the only people that ever bother writing to the council are those who want to complain about something. So they'll get 2 or 3 or 4 letters from say, oh, this looks dreadful, it looks really messy. And they say, well, we've got to do something about it. They never get the people that like it writing in to say, this is amazing, let's keep it up. So again, this is something, if the council's doing something good, then you must write and say, this is great, we fully support you, to counteract those few people who don't want it, which councillors will react to, because it's about whether they get elected the next time. So that is also something good. If you see something good, support your council and say yes, but your voice is powerful.
So that's what we could do in our local area. And if we think and about on the pesticides, for the environmental impact you've talked about, but is there anything that we can do? Can we, can you write to your MP, government side? Is there anything that we can?
Yeah, I mean, we've got quite a bunch of things on our website that you can do. So whether that's writing to your supermarkets to ask them to look at phasing out the most hazardous pesticides from their global supply chain, so that actually, us importing food is not impacting those people that are growing it for us. You can write to your supermarkets. Yes, you can write to various ministers, the DEFRA minister, etc., or your local council. So it's everything that's active and ongoing at the moment. It's all available on our website. Like I say, we've got the whole. So whether it's your food you're concerned with, whether it's sort of national policy or starting a pesticide-free towns movement, or seeing if there's one in your area already that you can get involved with, it's all on there, and all of it. And everything we do is free. We don't charge anything to anybody for it.
It's fantastic. The other thing that I thought was really brilliant when you want to sign up for your things is the Dirty Dozen list that you've done, to explain how people can avoid those pesticides.
Yes.
You've written that list. I think actually we had a question about that. And I think I had a couple of questions related to that. One of them was, if you wash your fruit and veg, how much difference does it make to the pesticide levels?
Probably very little.
Right.
Because the nature of the more modern pesticides is that they're systemic, which means they go into the entire body of the fruit or the vegetable or whatever or the plant or whatever it happens to be. So there was a study with chips from a chip shop, and they found that they had the exact same residues as the raw potatoes before they'd been put through the washing, the peeling, the frying, etc. So it's not a way to ensure that you're not going to get
make any difference.
Oh wow.
And then the second question would go with that really was actually, this is someone who knows a bit more, because the environmental working group, that group that works in America, sometimes puts out a pesticide list, and they don't tend to list the fruits that they don't, things like grapefruit that have got a peel on, but I noticed that you do. And I think that was a question as to how far that penetrates, but I think you answered that then. I think, the sound of it.
Actually, with citrus, a lot of it is on the surface because it's used as a fungicide to stop molding with storage and transport, because obviously we don't grow them here. But people do use the zest, etc., and they're touching them and they're coming off, they're storing them, etc. So it's on there. And again, when you look at this, it's also about the people that grow it. So there's a lot of problems with workers throughout the supply chains who are being impacted by pesticides for our food choices.
I guess it's the most vulnerable people who are getting exposed to them the most.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think, is there on the other side, are there fruits and vegetables that are low in pesticides, ones that if you can't afford to eat all your veg organic, are there ones that are a bit safer?
Yeah, I mean that's why we sort of do that list, is to show people that actually maybe these are the ones you want to switch out and stick with the others. So some things are less problematic than others. I would say that our list is relevant to the UK because it's taken from food that's produced in the UK, or is not produced in the UK, is on sale in the UK to consumers here.
It's really great.
The EWG one is US based, so it's different, and they come from different places. So, but again, there are crossovers.
I think I was reading as well. That cereal has like 100%. If you had Cheerios, for example, 100% of Cheerios have detectable pesticides in them. So a lot of the cereals are really high.
Mainly glyphosate.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is cereals are sprayed off before harvesting as a desiccant to make it easier to harvest, which is completely unnecessary for the most part. Just makes life a little bit easier for some people. And so cereal, bread, wheat, all the arable crops, grain crops, etc. Yes, glyphosate, and this is why we've seen increasing glyphosate residues. We've seen increasing problems with glyphosate. Personal theory, not glyphosate mixed with the way we make mass-produced bread, because there's not a proper ferment, not a proper ferment done. That sort of, I think, are raising issues of stomach problems, gluten.
A lot of people think that the wheat intolerances are going with that. They really have a real.
Yeah,
strong
I think those two things are.
together.
And you can probably look at map a graph of the increase in use of glyphosate as a desiccant, and the change in the way we make bread with the increase in those problems as well.
Yeah.
So the simple things as well. I mean, I remember, as a child, us and some friends going to a fruit farm, and like everyone, there, we probably ate more fruit than we bought. But I remember us at the end all having this very, very severe red mark all around our face. And, my friend's mum going, it's probably just because, you're getting a bit of an allergy just from, what they spray on it. And we're going, oh, yeah, you're probably right. And you look back at it now and you go, so hang on, we had a horrendous rash on our face from what they were spraying on the fruit. And everyone went, it's normal, it's fine. Yeah. And I don't think I've been to a fruit farm since, because I can still remember it. People just don't think of, what they're doing is they're going around and thinking, well, careful what you're spraying on the stuff here. Careful what what you're eating.
It's an odd relationship that we have with pesticides, because obviously after the war we needed to increase food production, and pesticides played a huge and important role in that. And so a lot of people will remember that. Actually, they did this thing. They helped us out of rationing and being more.
A lot of people think they help world hunger, don't they? But I don't think the evidence supports that strongly.
It doesn't support that at all. It's a non. Well, I shall be bold and say it's a lie put forward by the pesticide industry, who have a vested interest in maintaining their use. Well, pesticides have absolutely nothing to do with world hunger or food production. In fact, there are arguments that we produce too much food. In fact, we probably do produce too much food. It's about distribution and fairness and where the food goes and who gets it, rather than how much we can produce.
That one's one of the best solutions. I mean, a solution for this we always see is instead of going from monoculture, is to try and diversify and make your farm essentially grow all the things that work together, so that you've got the things that will eat the pests next to each other, will help you with that.
And rotating crops, I think it's that side as well, isn't it?
That's the basis of good sound agriculture, but also integrated pest management. I mean, the problem is if we stopped you, because what we've done is destroy all those beneficial insects, all those things that would naturally deal with predators. If we stop using pesticides tomorrow, agriculture would collapse, because we've destroyed the systems that would be able to support a healthy organic agriculture. So we need to phase them out. We need to build back and be more resilient. But yes, crop rotations, crop choices, and again, this is something that the consumer needs to do. It's the 6 types of apple you can get in the supermarket. Well, how many types of apple do we grow in the UK? How many types of apple are there in the UK? Any idea?
There's
40.
There should be lots. We've had many different types, but I don't think we have them anymore.
Close to 1,000.
Is there 1,000? I would have said about 100 at most. Gosh,
I was way off of my 40.
Or some such. Someone will probably call me out on that, but I think it is somewhere. It's way up there. It's huge, and that you see 6, and the reason being, our food system has been destroyed by the need to store, transport, and yield profit for growers. That's what's destroyed.
Also, we're losing that diversity in our diet. We're losing all those.
Nothing's grown for flavour anymore. Nothing's grown for health anymore. It's grown so it can be transported, so it can be stored, and so it lasts. So you can't find a ripe pear. You can't, and this is across the board, and that's hugely impacted on the nutritional value of the foods that we are able to buy. It's hugely impacted the taste profile of the foods that we can buy, and yes, it's ruined choice, but it's also then ruining our ecosystems.
And does organic is the way to avoid it in your food, is it, or do they use pesticides in any organic standards?
There are a few approved pesticides for use in organic. The majority of them are sort of naturally occurring things, like spearmint oil or whatever, so naturally occurring things, but there are a few others. But the difference is they're only applied if there is nothing else that's worked. If you tried your varieties, you've tried the mechanical, natural controls, etc., and only if there's a threshold of economic harm to the farmer, they will be allowed to be used very, very minimally. But there's about 17 of them. There are about 500 different pesticides used for conventional agriculture. And in terms of residues and what's left over, you will occasionally find a pesticide residue on an organic produce, but for the most part, that as a result of cross-contamination.
I mean, it travels in the air, doesn't it? So it's difficult.
Or things like DDT are still turning up because they're actually still persisting in the environment.
So, yeah.
But the longer we do the organic, the better. I mean, and also it is the better option, as long as it is an option.
Yeah.
But thank you.
It is. And I mean, I have a thing about organic, and obviously I'm fully supportive of organic, but I think over the years it has been missold. It's been rather sold as it's good for you, a lifestyle choice, whereas actually the real benefit of organic is what it does to the environment and for biodiversity. You know, that's the real thing about.
That's a great reason to do it.
And that should be the push that goes on it, really. And that it's not just
Climate.
being a kind of an affluent thing you could do. It should be this is vital for survival, really.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, it is.
Yep.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Nick. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
We'll have hundreds more questions, I'm sure, for you. We'd love to invite you back on again.
Yeah, more than happy to do. And like I said, everyone check out the website, drop us a line if you've got further questions. We'll have
I'm going to put all your details up because it's an absolutely fantastic website.
Yes.
We've been on it. It's got a load of resources for people. And
amazing.
yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks.
Yep.